Hey everybody, it's Donald again from Daily Product Prep. We're here today with Param, and we have a design a product question. We're actually going to do Daily Product Prep question number 49. Before we get into it, Param, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as you guys know, my name is Param. I'm currently a junior at UC Berkeley studying economics and cognitive science. It was kind of this combination of majors that really got me interested in product management. So then a couple of years ago, I started doing some PM internships, did a PM internship this past summer at Visa, and then loved it, loved the cross-functional nature of things. And so yeah, now I'm prepping for a couple final rounds.
Nice, nice. Well, we'll just jump right into it. So
Awesome.
Param, this question is number 49. Like I mentioned, it's a design a product question.
Cool.
And this was recently asked by Facebook. So
Sure.
the question is, I love traveling and meeting new people. Sometimes, though, it's hard to communicate in countries that I don't primarily speak the same language, particularly English. Design a new way for tourists to communicate with one another.
Cool. Is that a new way for? Awesome. Sounds great. Cool. So when we look at this question, are we like focusing on a certain goal in mind? Like, do we have a certain goal that we're trying to keep in mind when we do this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you think would be the goal if we're just trying to design a way for tourists to communicate?
Yeah, I think that if we're trying to, and this is for Facebook, right? So if we're trying to design a way for tourists to be actually able to communicate with each other, and I think it's to first of all, like increase the engagement with the app so that we're actually using the app a little bit more so that we can utilize that in a way to
Mhm.
increase, like we said, communication with, whichever country you're in or whichever people you want to talk to. So I think primarily it'd be to increase the engagement with the app and then also providing like a better experience for them overall.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Awesome. Cool. Write that down real quick. Cool. And then is there a specific, I know we said for tourists, but is there still like another, like a deeper customer segment that we want to focus on?
Um, why don't we dive a little bit into it, and you can tell me a little bit about what you might think would be a good target for us.
Sounds good. Awesome. Cool. So just before I kind of like dive into this,
Hmm.
just gonna give you a real quick structure about how I kind of want to go about this. So
Sure.
first of all, like you said, I'm just gonna kind of figure out some users and figure out who the customers are really gonna be.
Okay.
From there, I'm really gonna want to dive into some use cases, figure out some pain points, see what's like the issues right now. Then we're gonna prioritize something from there and go into some solutions that we can kind of figure out. And then finally, I want to figure out the trade-offs between each one.
Okay.
And then, lastly, validate the solution. So if I can take a couple quick seconds to figure out the users real quick, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. Take your time, and thanks for the structure.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. So when I think of tourists, really, and this entire like group of people that we're looking at, I really come up with like three main distinct types of customers or three different distinct types of users that might be want to like, use this sort of product.
Okay.
The first idea that comes to mind are just families that would want to go and travel. So these families are usually looking for travel and are tourists and are looking for more of like looking at it from more of like an entertainment perspective. The kids love to be immersed in this culture,
Hmm.
and the families themselves just want to make sure that the entire they're all having a memorable moment together wherever they go and just maximize as much fun as they can. The second main group that I was looking at were people who are single and just going out to explore themselves, just having a good time themselves, and maybe making sure that it's also memorable. But this time it's more focused on like an experience, like as we said, just for them, right? They're
Okay.
not they're not like worried about anyone else. They don't have any other like responsibilities. It's just them and themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and then lastly, the other user segment I want to look at, it was couples, right? So these
Hmm.
are couples who maybe travel a decent amount or maybe, and like just to, go out places together just to get something new,
Hmm.
get a taste of something else, and maybe even return to the same place again, just because, they might like it enough. And so these are the three distinct types of users that I was kind of thinking about. Is there anyone in particular that you'd want me to focus on?
No, I think that these three are good. Why don't we evaluate them, and then you can just pick one that you think is best.
Cool. Yeah, sounds great. Awesome. So, when I look into, what I really want to evaluate first, I'll
Hmm.
kind of go into what our goal was again, right? So as we said, our goal is to make as, best of an experience as possible and to increase
Hmm.
engagement in some sort of way. And secondly, I want to look at what Facebook's good at. And so as we know, what
Hmm.
Facebook's really good at is having enough social data and being able to make these connections between various people and utilizing that to their power. right? So they're able to maximize their ability because they're the best in this space of being able to create social connections with various people.
Yeah.
And so having that in mind, I would say that the one I would want to focus on is most likely going to be the people who are single. And this is mainly because usually when you have families in mind, let's say you have some kids with you, let's say you have an adult with you, it's the general user group of Facebook itself anyway is not really, there's not many kids on it as much as, you know, people who are on the older side of things. So they wouldn't have many use cases for it. It would be hard. I would assume that it'd be hard to get a lot of these kids to go out and, you know, download Facebook first of all, and then go on to use this app. So I think that would be like a risk to that and a kind of con to that. For couples, on the other hand, I think that that could work as well. But as I said, couples might have a different goal in mind, and their goal is just to, you know, be with each other more than anything else. They don't always want to focus on the idea of, you know, completely immersing themselves in the experience, like we're saying, right? They kind of have more of a focus on, you know, being with each other, doing things together like that, having fun still. But, you know, they're not as focused on being immersive as someone who is single would be. Because when you're single, you know, as I said, you don't have any responsibilities. You can just dive into the culture as much as possible and learn as much as you want. So that's kind of like the customer segment I would go on, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that sounds good. I like the solo traveler idea.
Cool. Cool. So from here, if I can take a couple quick seconds to kind of think of some pain points and user needs, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Yeah. So keeping in mind, again, our goal of engagement experience, and also keeping in mind that what we're really trying to do is make sure that we're enabling a way for people to communicate with one another, you know, specifically solo travelers, solo tourists. A couple of the pain points and kind of things that I would see or that I would kind of notice for a bunch of solo travelers is the fact that, one, they'd want to be able to communicate to figure out what type of food to eat, right? When you go into a different country, when you go into a different area, I think one of the primarily cool things, or one of the most immersive experiences about it, is being able to try the new food and testing that entire segment out. So I think that's one way that we can use the communication. That's one thing that's maybe lacking right now, is figuring out, you know, where to really eat when you go to a new country, and how to figure that out. Secondly would be, you know, when you're a solo traveler, it's fun being, you know, on your own and being in these immersive experiences, but you still want to be able to make new connections with people and meet new friends, and, you know, kind of dive into a whole that segment of things. Because, you know, it's presumable that you're going to be, you know, relatively social in nature, and you want to go out and have a fun experience. So doing that with other people would be beneficial with you as well. So meeting new people, making new friends is one way of doing things. And another thing that a lot of these solo travelers are going to want to do is probably go into and look into more like exciting experiences, or go into more new experiences that are just more thrilling for them than maybe what we might see for other different types of user groups. So that's really the three main different types of pain points / use cases I see for them. And is there anything in particular that you want me to focus on when I kind of look into certain solutions that we can think of, or no?
Yeah, I actually think that like these three are really good. I'm curious a little bit more about what you had in mind for making friends with making friends with other tourists or locals.
Yeah, for sure. So what I kind of had in mind was that, like, let's say you were to go to another country, then you would have, I would presumably you would have some people who are bilingual in some nature. So assuming that that a lot of these users, let's say, are focusing right now on America, for example, for Facebook, and people are going out from here, then assuming that you're going to have some sort of bilingual segment in these places, then they can kind of be like your mediator almost, who can kind of connect you to more people and connect you in that sense. Because I think that while we can be reliant on technology in some sense, you know, to translate and things like that, I think that having that human touch and human interaction will enhance it even more. So my idea of making new friends is having some sort of mediator there, who's bilingual, who can kind of speak your language as well, and kind of be able to connect you with other people from there.
Cool. Interesting. Can we dive a little bit deeper and flesh it out a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. Could I take a quick couple of seconds to kind of think of that real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Yeah. So the way I kind of envision this is, you know, let's say you're a tourist, you're a solo traveler, and you're kind of in a different country now. So the way I see it is, when you first log into Facebook and you go onto this hypothetical, like, you know, traveler section of the app, let's say, that we're able to create, From there, you'd be able to see this notification that kind of says, see local translators or guides near you. And then once you click on that, you can have some sort of video or, just general Facebook chat interaction with that person first. So you're connected first with some sort of translator or guide near you, and who's this like mediator almost that we're kind of thinking of. And then from there, you can kind of answer some of their questions they have. And some of the things they might be asking are things like, what do you like? What activities do you want to do? And, why did you come to this country? Like, is there anything specific that you're looking for? And from there, these mediators and travelers are going to be able to connect you to other people. So like from here, either Facebook or the mediator themselves, we can kind of dive into that, can make a group chat with other people who have similar experience or similar interests in terms of experiences or certain activities you might want to do. And, let's say they just want to hang out together or something like that, then this group chat can be like a vital connection for these different types of people. And because they have the same overall experiences and because they have the same, kind of goal in mind for what they want to do in this country, this, single mediator is able to help them, not only because, they're able to communicate with everybody, but also because now there's a group chat made for them. There's a video segment that they can do as well, assuming that, they're able to like video call each other. So that kind of like even immerses them together even more and kind of creates that more tangible connection with one another. And so that's kind of how I would envision this sort of solution for this to go about. I can kind of dive into the potential trade-offs with that as well if you want.
Sure. Before we get into that, I had a quick question for you. So essentially, sure. I think this idea is pretty cool. Essentially, we're trying to build like a marketplace where we can essentially bring tourists, solo travelers with like local experiences, essentially, right? Exactly. Through like this, the medium is the guide, right? So the largest funnel or the largest bottleneck, so to speak, would be getting enough guides, right? Getting enough qualified guides.
Yeah.
So before we get into trade-offs, just curious about how you plan to approach getting enough guides on the platform and how you plan to like mitigate some risks around like the guide experience.
Yeah, for sure. So that was definitely like one of the trade-offs I wanted to get into was just as you said, right? Like just like a guide, the amount of guides that might need to be there. And so like when I'm kind of thinking about these guides, I was kind of thinking about maybe this could be like another way for Facebook to kind of maybe focus on another like way to monetize their platform. So if they wanted to, they could kind of incentivize these guides or incentivize places or people in these various countries to be able to monetize themselves by, being able to, first of all, show that they're able to communicate with these various tourists. So, maybe just being able to pass some sort of, basic English proficiency exam. You're just doing something like that to prove that you're literate in some sort of way in that sense. And then from there, being able to monetize the platform. So maybe, I know we said that our goal is engagement experience, but if we want to provide this like, amazing experience for them and be able to provide this group chat and all these activities together as well, then we could charge some sort of fee or charge some sort of transaction to the user who wants to be able to, or the solo traveler in this case, who wants to be able to use this entire platform and this experience to be able to, kind of be able to connect with other people, connect with these guides. And so we can kind of mitigate the idea of not having enough guides by incentivizing them through monetization. So that'd be kind of one way to incentivize them. And we can kind of make sure that they are, like as literate as possible just by doing some sort of exams or making we either create some sort of like basic literacy exam, or, we can kind of ask them to show some sort of certification that they have proficiency in that language. So I think that's some of the ways that I would go about it to really be able to mitigate that.
Cool. Yeah, I think that like some of it is reasonable for sure.
Awesome. Cool. So would you like me to kind of dive into some of the metrics for this solution?
Before we get into that, do you think there's other like trade-offs that you'd have to make or other risks that are prevalent for this kind of solution?
Yeah, definitely. Could I take a quick couple of seconds to think about those real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so some of the things that I was able to come up with off the top of my head is the fact that there's going to be a decent amount of the population who are traveling to these various, countries that we're keeping in mind, wherever it may be, who are traveling from places that are not the U.S. Because there's a huge segment of the population who just might not be from the U.S. And so that would kind of almost hurt the idea that we're trying to create this mediator who's going to be, bilingual in some sense, or now they'd have to be, even trilingual or quadrilingual, or, just learn even more languages, or we'd have to figure out if we want to put them in a completely different segment of groups based off their language. So that's kind of one thing that I was looking at. The other thing would be that we need to like secure and lock down the fact that the locations need to be like pretty much very near to each other, right? Like let's say a country is an extremely large it's going to be super large, right? So like, let's say you're on one side of the country, but most of the tour guides and most of the people are on another side, right? So you have to make sure that like, maybe even before you come, that you know that maybe you're planning your entire trip around this, right? Maybe you should be able to, before you go on the trip, be able to help them out in the sense that to tell them to go to some specific city or go to some place that's usually generally like a very prevalent and a city that a lot of most solo travelers go to. And the third kind of thing that risk that I was looking at was the fact that because we're trying to create this group interaction and make sure that we can create these activities together for these people, there's going to be some people who are going to need to compromise their experiences in somehow or compromise their goals in some sort of way. Because let's say you want to make friends with like, 3 or 4 different people. While the goal is to create some sort of similar, experiences together, like let's say you guys like it and you guys kind of want to do things more along the way, you might have to give up something that you want to do. And so you might, maybe not like that aspect of things. And so to kind of mitigate these things for the people who are traveling from outside the US, we can kind of create different segments and different, create different chats and different activity groups for people who speak different languages. So before they kind of use this platform, we can ask them what language they speak. And if they speak like, let's say Chinese, or let's say they speak like some other language, right? Whatever it may be, Filipino, then we can kind of group them into one special chat and kind of go on from there. Again, we might have an issue of not having enough people to be in the chat together, but we can kind of go on there from there. In terms of locations, like I said, we can kind of, before they actually go on the trip and kind of progress forwards and book their tickets and stuff, we can kind of tell them like, hey, this is where generally most solo travelers go. This is where the activities are usually. So going there would be useful. And you can use this platform even more in that sense. And finally, in terms of compromising experiences, that's always, I think that's something that's going to be there no matter what. Like you're always, you might always have some sort of goal that you might want. So they can still be part of the group, but maybe one day if they really want to do something, or if you're a solo traveler and you really want to do something on your own, then you can just go out one day and do something on your own, right? You don't have to stick with the group 24/7. But the idea is you can stick with them for most of the time. You can, presumably like them and you go on with this, but you can also go on your own and do things by yourself as well.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Before we get into like metrics and evaluation, one of the other pain points you mentioned is for solo travelers is their desire to go on like more extreme, let's call them excursions.
Yeah.
Really quickly before we get into like evaluation and trade-offs and all that stuff, can you just like off the top of your head, next like 3 to 5 minutes, go through what you had in mind for excursions, including like some trade-offs that exist with them?
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good. So actually excursions kind of tie in well to the solution we already have, because assuming, like, let's say, just to think about it, like, let's say we have a group of solo travelers who are together and now they have someone of their, and presumably that they're all, wanting to go and get in some sort of immersive experience. We can kind of tailor it more towards these, thrilling experiences or excursions, like you say, by segmenting it by age as well. So let's say like you're in the age segment of, let's say like 18 to, 26, or like in your 20s, something like that. Then you're more likely to be part of this segmentation or population who is going to want to do more of these like fun or, thrilling experiences, just because that's just the general nature of what happens in that age. And so if we segment it by that and they're put into these special groups themselves, then they're going to be wanting to do, a lot of crazy things together. They're going to have a lot of fun together. They're going to, make posts about it, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that's one way we could go about it, is by utilizing this solution and kind of factoring that age segment of things and kind of going about it from there. The issue that might arise from there is the fact that if we do segment by age, then we just might not, like, let's say you're someone who's in their 40s or 50s, or like even older than that, who's a solo traveler and you kind of want to do things on your own, then you might be kind of left out and left alone, just because there's not many people in your age segment who might be a solo traveler, who might want to do like these sort of thrilling experiences. So if we're able to create some sort of option for them to be able to, like, let's just say you're a 30 or 40-year-old who like loves like thrilling experiences, and maybe adding some sort of option for them to be able to still join in these some sort of chats would be one way to mitigate that. But that's potentially like the main sort of trade-off I might see in doing that product.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Cool. Awesome. So now if I can take a quick couple of seconds just to go through some metrics, and then we can kind of come back together. Awesome.
Yeah, take your time.
Awesome. Yeah. So some of the metrics that I was able to think of was firstly seeing, and also like keeping in mind that we have the goal of engagement and having a good experience. First of all was seeing the average time that's spent on Facebook Traveler. So if we're able to create this new subsection, seeing how often is the average Facebook user actually on that tab. That could
Yeah.
be one thing. The other thing is seeing the click-through rate on actually choosing a guide and then finally paying a fee. So you might be on Facebook Traveler, you might be on it for a while, but how many of those people are actually converting into going through and choosing a guide and joining a group chat and kind of going through that entire section after paying that fee. Thirdly would be to see the number of people who go through and actually join a group. So this is kind of similar to the last thing, but not only do they choose a guide, they actually go through and join the group as well. So this is just kind of taking the steps through the customer journey and kind of in that sense. The other thing that I would want to see is the number of people who actually end up flying out after joining a group. So let's say you want to use a service and you're thinking about using the service, but how many of those people actually go and end up going to their destination? Because maybe, let's say that they were liking this, but then at the end, last second, they might have some, decision to not go for whatever reason. So they're not converting at the end of the day. The other thing I was looking at was maybe if people were able to rate their experience after using Facebook Traveler. So if a person is able to, once their trip is done, after everything's, said and done, they come back, they can rate their experience of using Facebook Traveler once they're done using the platform, see how much they liked it. And we can kind of have like a survey on there where we can allow them to rate the mediators, see how much they like them. So we can kind of give a rating system to the various mediators there, rate how they like using the platform in terms of the usability and like the UI of it. And so those are the different metrics that I was looking at. But if we're trying to see how much we can keep up engagement and try to keep as good of an experience as possible for them, then I think the two best ways that I want to go about it is to first of all see the click-through rate on being able to choose a guide, pay a fee and actually join a group. So going through that entire process of that, just because that's going to be the thing that's showing you, hey, are they actually engaged with the platform? Like, yes, they might be on Facebook Traveler, but that doesn't mean that they're actually using it for the intended purposes we have. So they're actually going through and using it as we intended. And secondly would be to the qualitative feedback we're getting in terms of allowing them to rate their experience after using a Facebook Traveler and rating the mediator. So those are the two main ways I'd go about it. And if I had to choose one particular metric out of those two, I'd prioritize the one about rating, like the qualitative feedback of rating the experience after you use Facebook Traveler and rating the mediator. And that's just because, I think, like I said before, like Facebook's really good at creating these different social connections, and our goal is to keep engagement experience as high as possible. And so if we're able to understand that qualitative feedback and understand, the issues that are actually underlying them, and see these individual stories and see these individual problems people may have, then from there we can actually tailor it even better to these various segments and tailor it even better to these various populations that we're looking at. And so that's why I would choose that over the click-through rate, just because that can still provide us a lot of value and information. But I think that being able to get that sort of qualitative feedback might be sometimes overlooked in a lot of other places. And so that's the way I'd go about that. One trade-off would obviously be the fact for this specific metric is obviously the fact that we would get a large amount of various responses. So it'd be kind of hard to aggregate that and kind of make a decision based off of that. But I still think that overall, once we are able to kind of index that and kind of go about it from there and group it, it'd be incredibly useful for us.
Cool.
And so
can you give me an example of how you might actually group the qualitative feedback, and then how you'd get an actionable insight out of that to iterate on the product?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. So I think one specific way to do that is to when we're making the survey and kind of putting that at the end, making sure that we're not giving the user a lot of free space in terms of we're not making them type out things themselves, or we're not making them write things out themselves, because that's going to A, just turn them off and not make them do the survey, and B, make it extremely hard for us to really be able to group these different things. So if you have specific questions like how would you rate your experience with this platform, or what was it difficult to do this, or was it difficult to go from point A to point B, and go from going from joining asking a mediator to join your group to actually being able to join a group, how difficult was that on a scale of 1 to 5? So figuring out that, and so being able to aggregate it by just terms of numbers would be one way to do it. And secondly would be to just rate the mediator you have. So being able to first of all rate the mediator, and then from there providing, if you want, adding some additional comments on that, like saying, hey, this person was great because XYZ, or I hated this trip because of XYZ, whatever it may be. That's one way I'd go about it. So I think in terms of making the survey, that's really the way we'd have to go about being able to aggregate these groups afterwards. Because if we were just able to kind of make it free range and just allow them to type whatever they want, then that would with the millions, like, billions of users that Facebook has, like that would almost be virtually impossible to do, right? Assuming that even
Yeah.
a certain segment of it uses. So I think making the survey is the most important part for that. And that's kind of how I'd go about that.
Cool. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Definitely, I don't think that like having like Yelp reviews would be too helpful, but
Yeah.
something like how Uber does basically, right? Like if you rate on the most important qualities of like a guide, perhaps that
Definitely.
obviously we could figure out by user testing, right? But
For sure.
but cool. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add to the solution?
In terms of the solution, I wasn't going to add anything else. I was just going to quickly go over a quick summary of
Sure,
what
go
I
ahead.
Awesome. So yeah, just to quickly summarize, first we defined the goal of which we decided was going to be making this experience as engaging as possible. So making sure that Facebook is as engaging and as delightful of an experience as possible. From there, we kind of figured out some users, which we eventually decided was going to be this single solo traveler who we're going to want to focus on. And in terms of various pain points, we decided to focus on this idea of being able to make new friends and be able to join groups there and go on from there, do activities from there. We figured out some solutions from there. And we kind of decided on this idea of creating this mediator who would allow you to also have some sort of group chat there and, have some sort of video platform maybe as well. And so diving into that side of things. And then finally, once we went over some trade-offs that are present, we looked into the metrics and decided to go with the qualitative feedback metric where we're still able to have some sort of numbers to be able to aggregate this entire thing.
Cool. Yeah, I think that was good. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you for the solution. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, so I can give you some feedback now.
Awesome.
Yeah, overall, I thought you did a great job. Honestly, I think that I like your structure. I liked how you laid it out too and provided me like with a structure so I knew what to expect. So good job on that.
Thank you.
I think that at the beginning you made one assumption that I don't think was a bad assumption. It's just like an assumption, which was that even though the question is being asked by Facebook, it's not necessarily constrained to being on Facebook as the platform. Okay. So maybe asking that as a question could have been helpful. I would have most likely said, yeah, like we obviously at Facebook, we would want to build something that helps Facebook. Yeah. But that was an assumption, right? And choosing between like having it stand alone versus being on platform, I think you could have made like just a quick comment onto like why we'd want it on platform. Obviously, I agree, right? Like I think that it makes sense to be on Facebook, but you could easily have spun it off similar to like Messenger, for example.
I see.
Or something else. Yeah. Obviously, there's like challenges with that, but just mentioning like, oh yeah, like I think that we should have it on the platform because of this could have been helpful. Yeah. Just at the top, right? Like before you even get into like any kind of solution. Sure. I like how you went back to the goal. So I have it 3 times. So you went back to the goal 3 times. I thought that was really good. It obviously helps remind me like what the goal is, and it makes it sound like you're tying everything in together, which you were. So I thought you did a good job there. Good segmentation, picking family, solo travelers, and couples. Or I think you used single travelers, but I called them solo travelers. Yeah. And and I thought that identifying the 3 pain points like food, making friends, and finding things to do. They're like pretty obvious things, but I think that like you did a good job at like selecting those. So one thing that I'd recommend is I thought the solution was good. Generally speaking, the solution that you're trying to implement is quite big though, right? Yeah. In terms of like if we were to actually roll this out, right? Essentially, we're building a marketplace where we connect guides with like Facebook users, and the guides are also Facebook users. So then there becomes like, it's called an asymptotic marketplace a little bit, where like there's more value to have like one guide than one user, because like a guide can probably satisfy multiple users, right? So I think that, and you kind of talked about this actually during your trade-off section, specifically when you talked about segmentation. I think that talking a little bit more about how you might roll something out like this, or at least, you mentioned like, for example, oh, we have a lot of older users, or like, what if a user is like bilingual, or what if a user doesn't speak English and their primary language is something else, then we have to accommodate for that. Just like small stuff about like, oh, obviously these are risks. And I would have liked to seen like, for part of segmentation is maybe doing smaller, like focused testing in certain areas, right? Maybe suggesting, oh, like we know that the engineering team and the product team is most likely speaking English. So like, it's easier for us to get maybe qualitative user research on people who speak English. So maybe we're going to focus on US travelers going to Europe and then to start. And then that way we know that like language is not going to be an issue. We don't have to worry about that we don't have to worry about that risk. Generally, they're like both very safe countries, so like we don't have to worry about like other risks about like pairing people together. Like small things like that. And then you could even say like, unfortunately, like maybe people who are like above the age of 40 and 50, they're like most likely going to be a smaller segment of this market anyway. So I think that we should focus on like, let's say the millennial or like the 20 to 32 range. And that way we know that these type of travelers are more willing to talk to other, like to new people. They're more likely to be solo travelers, more likely to be looking for like these experiences and talking about the pain points that you mentioned.
Awesome.
I think that would have been really, really helpful and made the solution even better.
Cool.
But like, this is just nitpicking. I thought that you did a good job. And when we got to metrics, I thought that like, it was, I think that like definitely conversion is good and like the rating system is good. You took a little bit of a risk and obviously didn't choose conversion as like your big metric. And I thought that you argued it pretty well. I think that was like pretty reasonable. I do think though that like it was reasonable. And then I think that you started mentioning like, oh, some things that we'd have in the form are like more on like usability testing stuff. And that's something that we'd probably do before we actually roll out a feature.
Oh, I see.
So for example, like how easy is it to book? Like that's something that we should figure out before we like create the flow, right? So I think that I understand what you're trying to say though. Obviously, like different like qualitative stuff is important. And I think that's reasonable. Another really cool metric in any marketplace. So if you ever get asked a marketplace question is it's not like necessarily conversion of like people going from guides to like, or like the flow, but it's called like supply side conversion. So like how much, like what percentage of like your guides are activated and what percentage of like your demand is activated. So an example, this is like at Uber, right? Maybe like your conversion is really high, but that doesn't mean that like, if you have like 1,000 or like 90% of your drivers are like not actually giving rides, that's bad health for the marketplace. Even if like 100% of users are converting, because that just means you don't have enough users to satisfy your supply. And the same thing works, vice versa, right? Like if you have a bunch of people converting, but like no one's getting paired because like there's not enough guides, then that's also a bad experience, right?
I see. Yeah.
So these are just like small things. I built a marketplace before, so that's why I have like this kind of information. But if you ever get asked, like a marketplace question, that's one metric that's like unique to marketplaces that I would consider bringing up.
Yeah.
Besides that, I thought it was good. Do you have any other questions regarding like your solution or the feedback?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask like one question I had was like, do you think I took too many pauses or was that like okay, like the number I took?
Oh no, I actually thought that was great. Like that was another feedback. I just forgot to write it down. I think oftentimes people like don't take time to like think through solutions.
Okay.
And it communicated to me like, okay, like you're actually like putting some thought. Maybe like the one recommendation is like before just jumping right back into it, just being like, okay, like I'm gonna start again kind of thing, or like some sort of thing. Because sometimes it just caught me off guard.
Oh,
you're gonna jump back into it. Because I'd be like reading notes or like writing something down. But yeah, I thought that like taking your time is fantastic. And like I don't have the timestamp right now, but the solution is like roughly around where you want to be in terms of length, right?
Okay.
And I even tried to throw you off a little bit by like making you go back to like another pain point and then like coming back, which like occasionally happens. I think that's happened like maybe 10% of the time when I used to interview when I was earlier in my career.
I see.
But, I thought that was fine, and I thought that it made sense, and it creates it also helps like bifurcate your solution, right? So like it can like the interviewer can compartmentalize like, okay, like this section's over, now we're in this section. I think it's fine.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much. And the only other question I had was like, did you think my solutions, because sometimes I know people like want to focus on creative solutions and things like that, like were my solutions like, I guess up to par, like would you say, or like?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. I think that the most important thing, and you nailed this part, was focusing on the user and focusing on the goal. It doesn't really matter like what you build, because if fundamentally like, let's say like you're a program manager or product manager at Facebook, right? And we're actually going to build something for the tourist space. The only thing we really, really, really need alignment on is why we're building this and who we're building it for. All like the minutia of like what gets built will eventually get massaged out through like, talking more, doing testing. Like this is all hypothetical because like you don't have an opportunity to actually test any of these features, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we go in and we test something and people are like, you know what, like this is too similar to Airbnb, so I'm going to just use Airbnb experiences instead, as an example, right? Not saying it is, but then we can iterate on it. But if we know that like the customer, like we know that this is the customer we want to focus on, and our goal is engagement, and like the customers want something like in this space, we can always just massage the features. So I think it's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that was super helpful. Thank you so much for that.